Hi guys, so today this is a review of what we worked on in class. What we created in class today was this image using found objects from the internet. You can see these are just different things that I pulled down from the internet and composited together to create this final image here, which is what we're going to be doing very quickly. I'm going to go through this at a very quick pace because we did this already, so this is just a review if you missed anything or just want to review. We started in Photoshop with a new file. We went to print and selected 11 by 17 tabloid. It is a total of 3300 by 5100 pixels at 300 pixels per inch. We selected the landscape format because that's what we're going to be using, and we hit create. And we got our canvas on which we can get started. I'm just going to go to Windows Workspace and reset the essentials so that everything looks similar to what you have on your computer here. The next thing we did was import some of these objects into Photoshop. So we dragged the potato onto Photoshop to open it up in Photoshop. We dragged all the objects onto Photoshop so that they would open up in a new window. We got the landscape here. We've got the bowler hat. And we've got our giraffe. And then finally we have our road. So now they're all open in Photoshop in different tabs, as you can kind of see here at the top. And you can also notice the tabs here. Untitled was the composite, is the thing that we wanted to use. We're going to go ahead and go File, Save, Command S here. File, Save. Looks like it's saved. And we're going to start adding things into that. So we start with our potato, and what we're going to do is use the Object Select tool, and we're just going to grab our potato and add a mask to it. Then we're going to pull it out of the tab and drag that into our composition. And now we have our floating potato on a background, as you can see. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is select our man. Again, Object Select, select the guy, make a mask, go back to the man, and what we did in class was we used the marquee tool to select this information here and hit Shift Delete so that the computer could get rid of that watermark and make it a little bit more realistic. And so now we have a man just standing there, black and white. Take that layer down and drag this entire layer into our composite area, as we can see here. I'm going to start labeling this man, potato. Okay, next thing we did was our landscape. We didn't need to do too much with this landscape, so I'm just going to drag this into the background here and just call it landscape. And I'm going to put it on the bottom because that's where it needs to be. Okay, next tab, we're just close these tabs when we're done. We don't need them, is the hat. So again, Object Select, because that does a great job of selecting what I've selected. Make a mask. Take this out of our frame here, put it into the space, call it hat, just so I know what it is. And then we can start closing these windows. We don't have to have them open if you don't want, because we don't need them anymore. The giraffe, again, Object Select, see how good a job it does, make a mask. We noticed in class that that didn't do a great job here, so we're going to use our brush tool, B for brush. And what we will be doing is painting with white to bring some of the parts that are missing back into the giraffe, just like this. And remember, we're on our layer mask here, which is why we're painting. Remember not to paint on the giraffe, otherwise you will be painting right on the giraffe, right? We're looking around our giraffe. We also noticed that the tail wasn't selected very well, so double-clicking our image mask brought us into our selection area, and what we did, looks like I've lost my tool palette here. I'm trying to find... Anyway, the second tool down on the tool palette that's missing on mine, but you'd be there for yours. What I do is I select it, and then I just paint everywhere that I think that the computer should take another look at and say, hey, this is not looking right. So painting that, you can see now I have a better selection. I hit OK, and now I have a pretty good giraffe running with its legs. Notice that there's an issue here. So again, layer mask, brush, paint with black will erase, paint with white will add, until we've got everything the way I want it, which is about right now. And now I zoom out, pull this draft down, add it to my outline here, or my document, and go to the next one. And then finally the road. So we're going to select just this part. We're using our lasso tool. So L for lasso, and then I'm going to select this. I'm just selecting inside of the white. And then Command 0, Command minus minus zooms us out. And then I've selected this, make a layer mask. And now I notice that I have this shadow here. So again, same polygon. I select the image, use the polygon lasso, just make sure I get all of that shadow in that selection, and shift delete it, and it will take care of the rest. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for now. We'll take this and bring it into our document and use the move tool, V for move, and now we've got all these objects and we're ready to assemble. All right, so let's start by turning off all the layers with the exception of the background landscape layer. We're going to transform that, Command T, and we're just going to bring it full size and hit return. Now you'll notice the left and the right have some stuff missing, so I'm going to use the M for marquee tool right here, and I'm going to shift select both sides at the same time and hit shift delete. And what that will do is everywhere that there is nothing, it will make up some pixels that look actually pretty good. And then Command D to deselect. So our landscape is done. Let's turn the road on now, and we want the road. Notice how I'm selecting the road layer here, and notice how it's linked to the mask. I'm going to transform the road to make it bigger, something like this, and then hit return. Maybe make it go down a little bit there. And now what we wanted to do is have this landscape kind of like the road coming out of the landscape. And the way we did that, turn off the road, go back to our landscape area, and we're going to jump this, Command J, to a new layer. I'm going to turn off everything but this layer, and I'm just going to call it foreground road. And what I'm going to do is use my selection tool, quick select, make the size of the using the bracket key of the selection area a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to drag across the bottom, and notice that it selects the areas just the way it decides to. So it's trying to find the edges here, which is what I want it to do. Once I've selected it, I can hit the make layer mask, and if I like the layer mask, I can now turn on the background, and what I will do is take the road and move it in between these two elements and then turn it on, and you'll now notice that the road is like it's coming out of this area. I can now modify the road using transform so that it sells it a little bit better, right? Maybe make it a little bit bigger and maybe a little lower, maybe stretch it by holding the shift key down like this, and that stretches it instead of just makes it symmetrically like open. When you're happy, hit return, and now we have a road coming out of this landscape. Next thing we're going to do is work on the man. So turn on the man layer here, and we'll just move him to about here in the road, maybe so that we can see through it. Now we need a shadow for his feet area. So the way way we did it in class is we selected the man, jumped the man to a new layer, and call it man shadow. And we threw the layer mask away and we applied it. And now we have a man just by himself, just standing there. You can see there's really two men. But what we're going to do is change the levels on this man by going to Image, Adjustment, Levels. We talked about the levels in class, but what we're going to do is crush all the blacks so that it's a solid black outline. So the way we did that is, again, I took this left little thing and I moved it all the way to the right. You can kind of see what it does. I hit OK, and now we have a silhouette of a man, right? We're going to transform that, Command T, and we're going to hold the Shift key down, which allows us to just grab the top and move it down so that it's making like a shadow in this direction. And then we're going to hold the command key and let go of the shift, and then we can actually make it shift it as if the sun's coming from here. And then we hit return. We can move that up a little bit so it's like right near the feet. And what we can do then is go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we can add a little bit of blur, maybe 6 or something, to the man's shadow. And now we have something that looks a little more convincing when we zoom out, as you can kind of see. Okay, because the man and the shadow should be one thing, I'm going to group these by shift selecting and then click them and click into a group and call it man. So this way, if we move the man, it will also move the shadow. Make sense? Okay, next thing is the potato. We're going to take a potato and put a hat on the potato. So we need the potato and the hat. I'm going to put the hat on top of the potato. I'm going to move the hat by selecting layer and going to the move tool, V for move. Transform the hat so that it's smaller, and I will put it right on the potato like this. So to really sell this, just like zoom in here, is I'm going to need to modify the potato and the hat so that they have some shadows. Now, a couple ways you could do this. You could select the potato, and if you were to just paint on the potato with the brush, B for brush, right here, and I use maybe a dark black thing, you can see I could just paint on the potato and that would give me this type of shadow, which is destroying the potato and it doesn't look realistic. So what we're going to do instead, like we did in class, is just make a new layer, call it shadow, and then we're going to paint on the shadow layer like this, and we're just going to assume the sun is coming from the top here. And I'm also going to paint where the hat would be. So I've got this kind of going on here, right? And I'm using a nice soft brush. You can see my hardness is pretty low and a large size, right? If I don't like what I've done, I can always hit the erase button and that'll erase it. But let's say we like that. We change the opacity, dial it down a little bit, or we change the blend mode to something like a soft light, which will give us, it looks like a shadow, but it's not fully shadow. Now, what we're going to do is take that, let's go back to normal and just change the opacity like to something like this. What we're going to do is now take this potato mask and add it to the shadow layer by holding the Option key and dragging it. What that does is it duplicates that potato mask onto this layer that didn't have a shadow before. So now we have like this shadow layer right here with the mask. And if we put that on the potato, then put the hat on top, it all kind of works. Now you'll notice this fringing element on all these things, and that's just because we didn't, in class we shifted the edge of all our masks in by double clicking the mask, which got rid of some of those fringing elements. Like with the potato, double clicked it, shifted it in, hit OK. It really helped with that fringing, right? But we don't have time to do that, so let's do it. All right, now we have our hat, shadow, and potato. I'm shift selecting and I'm going to put them all in a group and just call it potato, hat, maybe with the word, the letter T at the end here. All right, one last thing that potato needs if it's floating around in our world is a shadow, and we're going to do it the same exact way we did before. We're going to jump the entire group, Command J. We're going to rasterize this group by merging the layers, Command E. We're going to levels, Command L, and crush all the levels so it's solid black. We're going to transform, Command T, and holding the Shift key down, that allows us to transform it, and holding the Command key allows us to make the orientation the same as before. We're going to hit return, and then finally we're going to go to filter, Gaussian blur. This is our last filter, so we're just going to use that. And then we're going to move our shadow wherever we want, add a little less opacity, and then drag that into our potato hat group so that when we look in this group, we have the shadow, put it at the bottom, inside of that group, which means that we can always move the group, but we can also go into the group and move the shadow if we needed to. Okay, so we've got our potato. We could option drag that group to duplicate it. So there we go. And you can make this much bigger, Command T, with the entire group, as you can see. And let's say we want this shadow to be right above his head, like sort of Damocles. finally, that shadow he needs to be in the shadow, so we can open up this new potato copy and maybe make it large. And let's physically select the shadow and move it up so that it's above him like that. And then we'll close this down. All right, so far so good. The next thing we need to work on is this little giraffe here. You can kind of see it's very tiny. Let's make this a little bigger. Something like that. And notice currently we just have the giraffe and the outline. We need a shadow for this giraffe. So again, we jump the giraffe, Command J, delete the layer mask after applying it, Command L to open up levels, make it pure black and white, transform it, hold the Shift key down, hold the Command key down to offset it, hit the return button, and then finally filter Gaussian blur to blur it. And then we've got our shadow, change the opacity, and we can move the giraffe and the shadow into a group and just call it GRAFF, whatever, giraffe. Now we can move that giraffe anywhere we want. We are going to use the puppet tool on a copy of this giraffe, so Command J to jump that entire group over here. And what we will do, let's zoom in, is we will go into this giraffe group and we will throw away the copy of the shadow, and we will throw away the mask for the giraffe because we can't use a mask, we have to apply it. So now we have, I'm just going to hide this potato so you can see it. Now we have a giraffe, but if you look, it doesn't have a mask, so we have just the pixels that we've selected. And notice the selection. What we'll do is go to Edit, Puppet Warp, and that gives us a grid in which we can click points and now physically move these points so that in essence we can construct something that's extremely surreal. So by clicking on these points, I use these points to hold this area in place, and then maybe this giraffe is like doing this, and this looks pretty good. And I hit return, and now I've deformed this giraffe just like that. Now I can make a shadow of this giraffe the same way I've done before, jump it, level it, crush the levels to the left, transform it, Shift key, Option key, you get the idea, and then blur, filter Gaussian blur, and then change the opacity. So we can do that for this giraffe, and then what we can do is take that giraffe and copy it, jump it, you see, and put it on the other side and go to Edit, Transform, flip across the horizon, or horizontal. And now, of course, our shadow is messed up, so we probably want to redo that shadow so that it goes the other direction. Just a FYI there. So jump, transform, jump, levels, Command L, this, transform, holding the Shift key down and holding the Command key down, hit return, filter, Gaussian blur, and then change the opacity. And now we've got a more accurate shadow for this one because it goes in the same direction. And this, in a lot of ways, is the finished product. Now we added more hats everywhere. We did tint the man. So if we go to the man here, we can add an adjustment layer. And this one we're going to use is called Hue Saturation. And notice the Colorize button. We were able to colorize. Obviously, we could colorize the entire scene, get rid of all the colors, or we can just hold the Option key down in between this adjustment layer and the man, click, and now it's just colorizing the man, as you can see. You see? And now the man kind of fits in better with our image here. Just move this giraffe over here, maybe make it smaller, transform it, Command T, boom. Oh. And I need to group these things, so I need to select the group. That's one thing you want to be careful of. Command T, make it smaller, put it down here, boom. So this is how we worked with our Let's just move that potato hat over here. This is how we worked with Photoshop in class today. Hope you've learned a little bit, and try practicing this at home, and get ready for the quiz coming up on Friday.